Have you ever felt a chilling gaze locked onto you from the pitch-black woods, waiting for the exact, silent moment you finally let your guard down?
Some roads are better left untraveled, and some stranded strangers are better left behind in the rain. This is the bone-chilling account of a road trip that turned into a waking nightmare, proving that some legends waiting in the dark are terrifyingly real.
My name is Hamza, and this happened about 2 years ago. For the longest time, I debated sharing this, but honestly, even today, just thinking about that night sends a violent shiver down my spine. I used to think people exaggerated their horror stories about empty highways, dense forests, and desolate valleys. I believed they just wanted attention. But after that fateful night, my skepticism was permanently shattered.
The road trip was planned by 4 of us. Myself, Chad, Sean, and Omar. We all lived in Detroit and had been desperate to escape the city grind for a quick weekend road trip. The plan was simple: a scenic drive, beautiful country views, find a cozy spot to crash for the night, and head back the next day. After debating a few spots, we locked in a remote cabin area up in the dense, misty forests near the Ohio border.
One of our buddies had visited before and raved about how beautiful the deep woods looked when the weather cleared. Silent forests, thick, low-hanging clouds, and a strange, peaceful solitude. We were supposed to hit the road early in the morning, but as always with our group, early only existed in theory. When I called Chad at 8 a.m., he was fast asleep. Sean promised he'd arrive in 15 minutes, but showed up 40 minutes late.
Omar was our designated driver, and he ended up running late too. By the time we actually packed into his white sedan and hit the highway, it was already past noon. Even then, I had this sinking feeling that our trip was getting derailed. In mountainous, densely forested areas, leaving late means you're bound to take unnecessary risks after sunset. Still, we laughed and joked as we left the city limits behind. At first, everything felt completely normal. The weather was cool, a fresh breeze was blowing, and as the urban sprawl faded into winding back roads, the entire vibe shifted. The noise of the city died down. The roads grew narrower, and that exciting road trip feeling kicked in. We stopped at a roadside diner for coffee, and later hit a small local spot for burgers and fries. That was our biggest mistake. We stopped constantly.
Whenever we saw a scenic view, we pulled over. We took photos by a rushing river, stood on the roadside staring at the valleys sinking into the fog, and bought bags of chips and sodas. We were so caught up in stretching out the fun that nobody noticed how fast the day was slipping away. As the shadows lengthened and twilight began to crawl over the trees, I finally spoke up. "Hey guys, let's go straight now. Getting stuck out here in the dark is gonna suck."
Chad laughed it off, waving his hand. "Come on, it's barely dark. We'll be there in 2 hours, tops." Omar agreed, confidently adding, "I know the way, don't sweat it." But the truth was, we only knew the route as far as our GPS could guide us. And in the deep, isolated woods, overconfidence can be a death sentence. Some of those back roads look hauntingly empty, even during the day, and at night, they turn completely hostile.
As we drove deeper into the elevated forest routes, the weather took a sudden turn. Thick, heavy clouds rolled in, the wind turned icy, and the pitch-black darkness of a forest night swallowed us whole. In the city, Night falls gradually, but out in the wilderness, it's like someone instantly flipped off a light switch. Towering pines hemmed us in on the right, while a steep, endless drop-off to the ravine lay on our left. The cheerful chatter inside the car died down. The music, which had been blasting earlier, was now barely a whisper. Everyone was staring out of their windows. We were all silently realizing just how much precious daylight we had wasted. To make matters worse, our cell service completely dropped. Looking at his phone, Sean muttered, "Great, 0 bars." I tried to joke, saying, "Well, that's just perfect."
Omar slowed down. The road ahead looked completely abandoned, with loose gravel and wet mud spilled across the asphalt. Low-hanging branches scraped against the roof. On our right, the steep hillside pressed close, and on our left, the dark slope plunged into the abyss of the woods. Suddenly, the rain started. First, a few massive drops slammed against the windshield, and within seconds, it turned into a blinding downpour.
The wiper slapped violently across the glass, but the atmosphere inside the car grew tense and claustrophobic. The world outside was a blurry smear of gray and black. The headlights only illuminated a tiny patch of road before the driving rain swallowed the light. Omar gripped the wheel tightly. I can't speed up. The road is turning slick as ice. Sitting in the passenger seat, I strained my eyes, but the rain was scattering our headlights into a useless glare. A quiet dread crept into my chest. We should have stopped miles ago, but there was absolutely nothing around us. For 15 agonizing minutes, we crawled forward. Suddenly, Chad leaned in from the back seat, pointing wildly. Yo, look! Up ahead! I snapped my gaze forward. Standing on the left shoulder of the road, partially veiled by the sheets of rain, was a lone woman.
She was standing completely by herself in the downpour. She wore light-colored soaked clothes that clung to her frame, and her dark, wet hair was plastered flat against her shoulders. But what made my stomach drop was how utterly calm she looked. On a desolate road, in the middle of a dark forest during a storm, anyone would be terrified or desperate. But her face was blank. She simply stared at our approaching car and slowly raised her hand to wave us down.
Omar tapped the brakes, slowing the car. "Don't stop," I yelled instantly. Sean leaned forward from the back, his voice tense. "Dude, don't pull over. This could be a setup, a carjacking, anything." Chad countered, "But what if she's actually in trouble?" I snapped back. "In the middle of the woods, in a storm, at midnight? No way. Keep driving." Omar hesitated for an agonizing second, then pressed the gas and drove past her.
As we bypassed her, I turned my head to look through the side window. She was strikingly beautiful, almost unnaturally so. But her beauty didn't ease my mind. It did the exact opposite. It terrified me. Her expression was completely wrong for the situation. No panic, no desperation, no pleading for help. Just a cold, silent stare, as if she already knew we wouldn't stop. Within seconds, we left her behind in the dark.
A heavy, suffocating silence settled inside the car. After a moment, Chad muttered quietly, "Man, what if she really needed help?" I replied, "If she was a normal person, she wouldn't just stand there like a statue waving her hand. She'd be running toward the car, screaming, doing something." Sean agreed with me, admitting she gave him the creeps. Omar kept his eyes on the road, driving silently.
Barely 5 minutes passed when a deep, violent rumble echoed from the mountain above us. At first, it sounded like distant thunder, but the roar grew deafeningly loud in seconds. "Landslide!" Omar shrieked, slamming on the brakes. Before we could even react, a massive boulder crashed down the slope, slamming directly into the front end of our car with a horrific, metal-crushing boom. The violent impact spun the car sideways, throwing us violently from our seats. My shoulder slammed hard against the passenger door. In the back, Sean let out a sharp cry as Chad's head whipped into the front headrest. The car screeched to a halt, sitting diagonally across the narrow road. For a second, we sat in stunned, breathless shock. Then Omar yelled, "Get out! Get out now!" We flung the doors open and scrambled into the freezing rain. The road was rapidly turning into a muddy river, and small rocks were still trickling down the hillside. We backed away from the car, our hearts hammering so loud they drowned out the sound of the storm. I looked at the vehicle. The hood was completely buckled on the front left side. We desperately prayed the engine and tires weren't completely ruined.
Chad wiped the water from his eyes, gasping. "We're alive, man. Thank God." We stood on the edge of the road, soaked to the bone, watching the dark slope above to see if more rocks would fall. Only small pebbles kept trickling down. We decided to wait a minute before inspecting the damage. But as we stood there, I caught a sudden movement down in the ravine on our left.
Down in the pitch-black woods below the road's edge, something had moved through the driving rain. At first, I tried to convince myself it was just a swaying branch. But then, the shape began to glide upward, scaling the steep incline toward the road. I pulled out my phone, switched on the flashlight, and aimed the beam down the slope. It was her, the same wet, pale woman, her hair clinging to her face, now standing so close to the road's edge that there was no mistaking her. I froze, unable to speak. The other three followed my light and gasped. "Oh my God, it's her!" Sean shrieked, stumbling a step back. Omar retreated, his face pale. Chad's voice shook violently as he whispered, How did she get here so fast?" My flashlight beam hit her face directly. The moment the bright light illuminated her eyes, she spun around and sprinted back down into the dark ravine with a terrifying speed that is permanently burned into my memory. That run, it wasn't human. It wasn't completely animalistic either, but she moved so smoothly, so incredibly fast, that the thick mud, steep slope, and dense trees didn't slow her down for a single second. Within moments, she vanished into the dense tree line. "That is not a person," I whispered, my voice trembling. Our faces had completely lost all color. What had felt like a simple road accident just minutes ago had suddenly warped into something deeply unnatural. Trying to keep my head, I urged the guys back toward the car. We needed to see if we could drive out of there. Upon closer inspection, the damage was bad. The crumpled metal of the fender was bent inward, pressing hard against the front left tire. The engine started up fine when Omar turned the key, which gave us a sliver of hope. But if we tried to drive with the metal scraping the rubber, the tire would burst immediately. We needed to push the car back a few feet first to get it away from the active landslide zone. With a massive, coordinated heave, we managed to slide the car back a few inches. It wasn't entirely safe, but it gave us room to work.
I grabbed the jack, a lug wrench, and an iron pry bar from the trunk. Standing in the freezing downpour, we took turns trying to pry the bent metal away from the tire. Our hands kept slipping on the wet steel. Our clothes were heavy and soaked, and every few seconds, one of us would nervously look back at the dark woods.
Suddenly, a sharp thud echoed from the far side of the car, as if someone had hurled a heavy rock at the passenger door. We all froze, our tools suspended in midair. The sound had come from the left side, the side facing the steep ravine. We stared into the darkness. The rain was relentless, blinding our vision. But then I saw it. A pale, white shape shifting behind a nearby pine tree, slowly sliding downward.
"Guys, she's stalking us," Chad whispered, his voice cracking with sheer terror. Sean dropped his wrench onto the gravel. "I am not staying out here. I'm getting in." Honestly, none of us had the courage left to stand in the open rain trying to fix a broken car. With the constant threat of falling rocks above and a malevolent presence watching from below, we scrambled back inside the cabin of the sedan.
The moment we slammed the heavy doors shut and locked them, a fleeting sense of safety washed over us. Outside, the rain drummed violently against the roof, fogging up the glass, while the sound of our ragged breathing filled the cabin. But that comfort didn't last. A few moments later, a distinct, soft tapping sound came from the back of the car. Tap, tap. Then, a heavy scraping sound slid along the undercarriage, vibrating through the floorboards.
Sean, sitting in the back, bolted forward, clutching the front seats. I swear to God, there was something underneath us. We froze, paralyzingly still. Suddenly, a massive, heavy thud shook the roof of the car, as if something heavy had jumped from a tree branch directly onto the top of our vehicle.
For several agonizing seconds, nobody dared to breathe. The rain continued to hammer the metal roof, streams of water racing down the glass. Outside, the darkness was absolute, forming a black wall just beyond our headlights. But the sudden silence from the roof made us feel like we were trapped in a coffin, with something hunting us from just inches above our heads.
Maybe it's just a wild animal, Sean whispered, though his voice lacked any real conviction. Omar didn't reply. His hands were locked onto the steering wheel, his knuckles white. Sitting in the passenger seat, I strained my ears to catch any sound from outside. If it were an animal, we would have heard it shift its weight, slide off, or scramble onto the asphalt. But there was nothing. Just an eerie, suffocating silence.
The rain felt different now. Usually the sound of rain is comforting, but tonight it felt like a heavy curtain hiding something monstrous. The windows were completely fogged up, hiding the outside world entirely. In the back seat, Chad closed his eyes and began quietly reciting prayers under his breath. Moments later, I joined him, followed by Sean and Omar. We weren't praying to comfort each other. We were praying for our lives. A minute passed in that tense, prayer-filled silence when the back of the car dipped slightly. It felt like something heavy was crawling underneath, shifting from side to side. The car rocked gently, then settled. "What is that?" Sean whimpered, on the verge of tears. I turned my head to look back, but the rear window was too fogged up. I reached back and wiped a small circle clean on the cold glass.
As soon as I pulled my hand away,
A faint, rhythmic scratching sound began. It wasn't on the roof anymore. It was right on the metal trunk of the car, like long fingernails scraping slowly against the paint. The sound was quiet, but it set our nerves on fire. "Don't open the doors," Chad pleaded. "Whatever you do, do not open the doors." Omar slammed his hand onto the ignition. "I'm getting us out of here." He turned the key. The engine roared to life, but the crumpled metal was still locking the front wheel. Omar pressed the gas. The car lurched forward violently, hit a hard resistance, and stalled out. "We're stuck," Omar muttered, gritting his teeth. That sentence crushed whatever little hope we had left. Suddenly, 3 heavy, deliberate knocks rattled the rear passenger door. Thud, thud, thud. It wasn't a casual knock. It sounded like someone was hitting the steel door with a blunt, heavy object. All of our heads snapped back, and then the most terrifying moment of my life unfolded. A flash of lightning ripped across the sky, illuminating the forest for a split second. Through the wiped circle on the fogged glass, a human-like silhouette was standing right behind the car. The figure was leaning in close, both hands pressed flat against the glass, head tilted downward, as if straining to peer into the dark cabin. "It's her!" Sean shrieked. The lightning faded, plunging us back into pitch darkness, and the silhouette vanished. My heart hammered so violently against my ribs, I thought it would burst. What we saw in that split second was enough to confirm our worst fears. Why was this thing stalking us? Why wouldn't it leave us alone in this storm? "Nobody opens a door," Chad yelled. Nobody argued. Suddenly, a rustling sound came from the right side, the mountainside, as if something had sprinted past the passenger doors and stopped. We were completely disoriented, unable to tell where the threat was coming from. Was it behind us, under us, on the roof, or lurking on our flanks? Fear was starting to make us unravel. I pulled out my phone. Still no signal. Chad and Sean checked theirs, but their screens showed the same empty bars. We thought about dialing 911, but without a network, the calls wouldn't even initiate. The rain poured even harder. Every now and then, it sounded like something heavy was sliding across the wet roof, but we couldn't tell if it was real or just our spiraling paranoia. Then, a new sound cut through the storm. It was a faint, weeping voice of a woman. It started as a low, soft sigh in the wind, but gradually it turned into an agonizing, warbling cry coming from the dark woods on our left. The wind distorted the words, but the tone was unmistakable. It sounded like someone crying or humming a twisted, mournful tune. Sean grabbed Chad's arm. "That's not a human! That's not a human!" Omar slammed his hand onto the horn, hoping the loud blare would scare off any wild animal. But the moment the horn stopped, a heavy, violent shake hit the rear bumper, as if a massive force had shoved the car from behind. The sedan lurched forward a few inches and stopped. "It's pushing us!" Chad screamed. A cold dread washed over us. If whatever was pushing the car kept sliding us toward the left, we would roll down the steep slope into the dark ravine. The road was narrow and the drop-off was steep. We frantically checked our door locks again. A moment of silence passed, followed by another violent shove. The car shifted further. I peered out the window, but saw nothing but rain. The physical movement of the car was undeniable. We looked at each other, realizing that staying inside was no longer a safe option. If this car goes down the slope. We're dead, Chad said. Omar's face was twisted in a look of pure terror I had never seen on him before. Here's the plan, Omar whispered. On the next big push, we all jump out at once. We can run faster on foot.
But what if she's waiting for us? I asked. Omar snapped back. At least on foot, we have a chance to run. If we go down the ravine in this metal box, we're finished. Nobody argued. We gripped our phones, pocketed our wallets, and I readied my flashlight. Chad prayed frantically under his breath. Then the car rocked violently twice in rapid succession. "Go, go, go!" Omar screamed. We flung the doors open and lunged into the freezing wind and rain. I immediately slipped on the wet mud, but managed to scramble to my feet. Omar jumped out of the driver's side, while Sean and I pushed out of the left. Chad scrambled out behind us. The moment our feet hit the asphalt, we felt a sudden rush of air, as if a heavy presence had violently retreated into the brush the second the doors flew open. I whipped my flashlight toward the back of the car. The beam pierced the thick mist and rain, catching a fleeting glimpse of a pale, white shape disappearing down the steep slope into the thick trees. Nobody even thought of following it. "Leave the car!" Omar shouted. We locked the doors, grabbed our essential documents, and started running down the dark, winding road, leaving our heavy bags behind. We couldn't run full speed because the road was slick with wet mud and gravel, but we moved as fast as our legs could carry us. After rounding a sharp bend, a dim, warm light flickered in the distance below. "There's a house!" I gasped. We pushed ourselves harder, heading toward the light. As we drew closer, we realized it was a small, isolated cabin sitting on the edge of the woods. We ran up the wooden steps and began pounding on the door. After a few agonizing moments, we heard heavy footsteps inside, and a middle-aged man, wrapped in a heavy blanket, opened the door, holding a flashlight. He looked at us. 4 soaked, muddy, and absolutely terrified city guys. "Our car got hit by a landslide up the road," I panted. "Can we stay here for the night?"
The man remained quiet, studying our faces. He didn't invite us inside, but asked where the car was and what had happened. We told him about the boulder, but kept the strange woman out of it, not knowing how to explain it. He shook his head. "My family is inside. You can't stay here. But there's an old caretaker who has a small rental cabin further down the trail. He might let you stay." He went inside, grabbed a thick wooden walking stick and his jacket, and offered to guide us. As we walked down the slippery dirt trail, he looked back and asked quietly, "Did you see anything else on the road up there?" Chad hesitated. "What do you mean?" The man replied, "Sometimes, in these deep woods, people see things. A shape waving for help, or a shadow following them. If you see it, you never stop." A cold sweat broke out on my neck. None of us dared to tell him we had actually seen her. "Why do you say that?" I asked. He shrugged. "Just local wisdom. You don't go near things that wander these woods at night." We walked in silence until we reached a weathered, dark wooden cabin. The man knocked, and after a short exchange with an elderly caretaker, we were granted shelter for the night. The cabin was completely dark, with no electricity. The only light came from a sputtering oil lantern the old caretaker left for us on a wooden table. The place felt empty and ancient,
surrounded by towering pines that scraped against the roof in the wind. The old man tossed us 4 heavy blankets and told us to leave first thing in the morning. Then he locked the door and left.
As his footsteps faded into the sound of the rain, the gravity of our situation hit us. We were wet, freezing, and stranded in a creepy cabin with no cell service and no help for miles. The heavy dread that had followed us from the road felt like it had crawled into the room with us, lingering in the dark corners where the weak lantern light couldn't reach. We stripped off our wet jackets, changed into whatever dry clothes we had left in our pockets, and wrapped ourselves tightly in the blankets. "We leave at first light," Omar muttered. "We'll check the car and get out of here." Chad was dead silent, staring blankly at the wooden floor. I tried to calm the mood. Maybe we just panicked. The storm, the landslide, it makes everything seem worse. Chad looked at me, his eyes wide. "Hamza, you saw her. We all did. And she was right behind the car." I didn't answer. Deep down, I knew he was right. We ate a quiet meal of bread and tea that the caretaker had left us, locked the heavy wooden door from the inside, and tried to rest. But sleep was impossible. Every creak of the cabin and rustle of the pines made us jump.
About an hour passed when a sudden flash of lightning illuminated the small window. For a split second, a dark silhouette appeared against the glass. I bolted upright. "Did you guys see that?" Omar whispered. "At the window." We stared at the glass. The next flash of lightning revealed a pale face pressed right against the dirty window pane, staring directly at us with hollow, empty eyes. The lightning died, plunging us back into darkness. Suddenly, a violent pounding rattled the heavy wooden door. Bang, bang, bang. It was an aggressive, unnatural scratching and pounding, accompanied by a muffled, high-pitched whimpering sound of a woman crying outside. We huddled together, reciting prayers at the top of our lungs as the door groaned under the pressure. The terrifying noise lasted for what felt like hours, then abruptly stopped. As dawn finally broke, casting a pale gray light through the window, the storm passed. We gathered our things, unlocked the door, and looked down at the muddy porch. Directly in front of the door, deep prints in the mud showed where something had been crouching all night. We hurried back to our car. Under the morning sun, the horror of the night before was written all over the vehicle. Deep, aggressive scratch marks, resembling a 5-fingered hand with sharp claws, were gouged into the paint of the trunk and doors. We managed to pry the bent fender off the tire with our tools, got the car started, and drove down to the nearest town without looking back.
If we had stopped for that woman in the rain, I don't think any of us would have made it back to tell this story. If this spine-chilling tale gave you goosebumps, please hit that like button. Share this video with your fellow horror lovers and subscribe to the channel for more terrifying encounters. Sleep tight and never stop for strangers.